Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into one of the most shocking military collapses of the First World War, the Battle of Caporetto. We're going to explore how this one single offensive didn't just shatter an army, but actually went on to reshape a whole nation's psyche and the very course of the war itself. So let's just start with the final verdict, shall we? The greatest defeat in Italian military history. This wasn't just a loss on the battlefield. No way. As we're about to see, the Battle of Caporetto was a catastrophe so complete that the name itself became synonymous with failure in Italy. Okay, just look at these numbers for a second. They tell a really brutal story. The total casualties are completely lopsided. But the really mind-blowing number, the one that tells you what actually happened, is right here. Prisoners taken. Over 250,000 men. Think about that. That isn't just a combat defeat. That's an army coming apart at the seams. It's a wholesale surrender, a total breakdown of morale on a scale that just stunned everybody. So the big question is, how did this happen? To really get your head around the collapse, you first have to understand the sheer, staggering scale of it all. This wasn't a battle lost in a single afternoon. This was the beginning of a cataclysmic rout.
150 kilometers. Let that sink in. This is World War I, a war where armies would bleed for years to capture a few meters of muddy trench. And here, the entire Italian front was shoved back 150 kilometers in just a few weeks. Now, this wasn't some orderly, tactical withdrawal. Oh no, this was a desperate, chaotic flight across northern Italy, a full-on sprint to a last-ditch defensive line at the Piave River.
And this chart, wow, this just hammers home the human cost of that retreat. Before the battle, the Italian army has about 1.8 million men ready to fight. Afterwards, it's barely a million. Almost half of its fighting force gone. Killed, wounded, captured, or in many cases, just scattered to the winds, having deserted. It was a blow so devastating it almost knocked Italy clean out of the war. Okay, so to understand how an army can just dissolve like that, we have to rewind a bit and look at what came before. You see, a disaster like Caporetto doesn't happen in a vacuum. It was the absolute breaking point after years of just brutal, grinding warfare on the Isonzo Front. For 2 long years, the Italians and the Austro-Hungarians had been locked in this horrific stalemate, just hammering away at each other. By the summer of 1917, after 11 of these bloody battles, the Italian army had actually pushed the Austro-Hungarians to the very brink of collapse. Their emperor, a man named Karl, knew his forces just couldn't take another hit. And right here, this is the crucial turning point. Facing total annihilation, Austria-Hungary makes a desperate plea to its ally, Germany. And Germany doesn't just send a few extra divisions. Nope. They send their A-team. We're talking mountain warfare specialists, strategic planners, gas experts, the whole shebang. The fight was about to change because this was now a German-led operation. And it was designed for one thing and one thing only, a decisive knockout blow. Right, so how in the world did they achieve such a stunning breakthrough? It wasn't really about overwhelming force, it was about a whole new way of fighting. A method the Italians were completely and tragically unprepared for. This was the secret sauce, infiltration tactics. So, forget the typical World War I image of guys climbing out of trenches and running into machine guns. This was different. The idea was to use elite stormtroopers who were trained to be like water. Don't smash into the heavily defended forts, just flow around them. Find the weak spots, pour through the cracks, and get deep into the enemy's rear to cause absolute chaos from the inside. And this is how that terrifying plan unfolded. It's like a perfectly choreographed sequence. It starts at 2 in the morning with a silent, deadly gas attack that just smothers the Italian trenches in the valleys. Then, at dawn, a short, unbelievably violent artillery barrage hits. But it doesn't just target the front line. It hits the command posts, the communication lines, the artillery batteries. It basically blinds and deafens the Italian leadership. And it's in that chaos that the stormtroopers advance, pushing deep, deep into the rear before the Italians even know the line has been broken. 25 kilometers in a single day. I mean, in a war where progress was measured in meters, this kind of speed was just unthinkable. It completely shattered the entire Italian defensive network. By the end of day 1, the battle was, for all intents and purposes, already lost. So let's talk about the consequences. What followed this breakthrough wasn't really a battle anymore. It was the chaotic rout of an entire army. And Of course, a desperate search for someone to blame.
But here's an interesting little twist. The attack was so successful that it actually created its own problem. The German and Austro-Hungarian forces, including a young officer you might have heard of named Erwin Rommel, advanced so quickly they literally outran their supply lines. It's ironic, really. Their own exhaustion and lack of food was one of the few things that kept the entire Italian army from being completely destroyed.
In the aftermath of a disaster like this, heads have to roll. And the first to go was the Italian commander Luigi Cadorna. He was dismissed, and frankly, it was long overdue. He was a guy who ruled through brutal discipline, who'd sacked over 200 of his own generals, and who always blamed his troops for failure. Morale was already shot because of him. His replacement, Armando Diaz, was a total shift. Diaz actually understood that to rebuild an army, you have to first restore its spirit. He promised reforms, better food, and even land after the war. He gave them a reason to fight again. So, what was the lasting impact of all this? Well, the battle left this deep, permanent scar on the Italian psyche. But, and this is the really wild part, it also, paradoxically, planted the seeds for their eventual victory.
The name of this little town became a permanent part of the Italian language. To this day, if you want to describe an absolute, unmitigated disaster, a total catastrophe, you call it un caporetto. It's like a linguistic scar left on the whole country. The key takeaway here is that the shock of Caporetto forced fundamental change. The government in Rome, it fell. The Allies, who were completely stunned, finally got their act together and formed a Supreme War Council to improve coordination. And for Italy itself, with the enemy now on home soil for the first time, the war became a desperate fight for national survival. Paradoxically, this terrible defeat forged a will to resist that victory never could. And that's really the ultimate question of this whole story, isn't it? The humiliation of Caporetto stripped Italy down to its core. It forced the country to rebuild its army, its government, and its national purpose from the ground up. And from the depths of that catastrophic failure sprang a whole new resolve that just 1 year later would lead them to final victory. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the road to victory has to begin with total defeat.